Welcome to the 6th episode of the Dire podcast, recorded on March 7th, 2020. I'm Sean Pfeil, and today I am feeling pretty anxious, so we'll see how this episode goes. Today we're going to talk about the Final Fantasy VII Remake demo. It came out on PSN earlier this week, and I got a chance to play it, so we're going to discuss that. In the middle of the podcast, we're going to take a break to meditate, center our thoughts, and de-stress, because boy oh boy do I need that today. And at the end, we're going to add 5 games to the list. Those 5 games are Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, Ice Climbers, Castlevania, Contra, and this episode's featured game, The Oregon Trail. For those of you watching on YouTube, you're watching me play the Final Fantasy VII Remake demo. For those of you listening on Apple, Google, or Spotify podcasts, you can head over to dirediredocs.com to find the video version of this podcast if you would like to watch me play Final Fantasy. Alright, well, it finally happened. The Final Fantasy VII Remake demo finally released on PSN. It had leaked that it was available on PSN, at least it was on PSN, just you couldn't download it back in January. Here we are now in March, and it finally showed up. So I decided to dive in. I was going to wait until the game came out, but I thought, it's just the beginning of the game. It's only going to go through the first boss, and that's like a very small slice of Final Fantasy VII overall, even though this game is a small slice of the game overall as well, since it's just Midgar. But anyway, I'm going to start with the good. The first thing I noticed right off the bat was the incredible attention to detail in a lot of different things, but specifically the clothing of the characters. Now, I'd reacted to the intro of the game earlier prior to the demo's release, but watching the direct feed version of the intro and seeing Aeris's clothes up close was absolutely nuts. You can see the threads in her shirt. And it doesn't just go for her. Like, I noticed it in other areas as well. I noticed it on Barret. I noticed it on some of the Shinra soldiers and Cloud. Like, the attention to detail and the textures of their clothing is nuts. And they do a bunch of little things like, I guess it's Nomura, so it should be expected, like buttons and straps and zippers and pockets and things like that, but it's not over the top like Kingdom Hearts, but it's just the costumes are very well done in this game. I was very surprised. So if they put that level of detail into the character design, specifically their clothing, I'm excited to see some of the larger areas of the game and maybe some of the attention to detail they had there. The world itself, the game itself, just overall visually amazing, and I think a lot of the level design so far looks really good. I think it's hard to be super creative when you're in an industrial sort of setting, which is where the first part of the game takes place. Right up front, when you go into the train station, there's a lot more detail. There's posters on the walls. There's the turnstiles you got to go through, and they put lights on them in different areas. Like, that area looked really, really good. As you progress further in, it becomes a little bit more industrial. So it's, pipes and cloth and boxes and cables and stuff like that, which all still looked really amazing for an industrial setting. I'm curious to see how much more attention to detail and how much more creative they could be in a more organic environment elsewhere in Midgar. So we'll see. And one other thing about attention to detail that I really liked is when you kill an enemy, specifically an organic enemy, you can see their spirit returning to the life stream. That was something that you see in Final Fantasy VII Advent Children. Whenever, well, at the end of the movie, and probably in a few other places, when you see someone get killed, they like dissolve into these green orbs of light, and that's them returning to the life stream, which I thought was a really nice touch. And it was actually a really cool way to get rid of the geometry in the level by deloading out the fallen enemies so they're not taking up resource power or memory, by having their corpses just devolve into the life stream. I thought that was really cool. Some of the mechanical enemies just explode and disappear, so that makes sense as well. But for the organic enemies, just so they don't just die and fade out or die and stay there, I thought was a very nice touch. Let's see. I guess I already talked about the level design, but it felt like a real world. Like, it felt like a lived-in world, if that makes sense. It didn't look like our world, obviously, but even though it was going for the more, what would you call it? Realistic, I guess, looking tone. It didn't, but it just looked lived in, and I'm very excited again to get out into the bigger Midgar area to see what it looks like. The facial animations were really good in this game too. Especially Cloud. Like, there's a whole bunch of range of emotions that go on in his face, and there's so much subtext there. Especially if you've played Final Fantasy VII, you know what's going on in his head. His head is just a complete screwed up mess at this point in the game, and it comes across in his facial expressions, which, brilliant, just absolutely brilliant. I'm glad they're paying attention to that sort of thing. And even outside of the facial animations, just the body language. There's a scene in the elevator when Barrett starts monologuing, and he hunches down and he's like twisting his arms up to try and get his point across. It felt so cartoony, but at the same time, it was Barrett. Like, that's part of his character, is when he gets going, he gets not emotional, he just gets totally bought into what he's saying, and you can just see the passion flowing through him, and I thought that was so great. And the voice acting really has sold me on these characters too. The voice acting in Advent Children wasn't particularly amazing. I mean, some of the voices were okay, I guess, but on most of my watches, I just watch it in Japanese, because I didn't really like the dub. But the voice actors in this, I don't think they're all the same. I'm pretty sure they're different, but even if they aren't different, they put in some time and effort into making these characters believable and organic. Especially Cloud and Barrett and Jessie, who, I've been reading online all the feedback about her. Like, her expanded personality in this is really good. She still had that weird soft spot for Cloud in the original game, but they ran with it in this demo. And I'm going to assume they run with it further up until that point in the game that, if you played it, you know what I'm talking about. So we'll just cut it there. Yeah. I guess the last thing that I want to say that I thought was a really nice touch was, in the original game, all the enemies, for the most part, are random encounters. There are a couple times where you'll see enemies on screen and then they run at you, and then it transitions into battle. But they can't do that here, right? Everything is in real time. And what I really liked was, multiple times you see the rest of the team from Avalanche, other than Cloud. They're kind of like hiding until the enemies run by, and then Cloud engages, and then they keep going and leave Cloud to do the fighting. And that just works so well with the whole concept of, hey, we need this extra mercenary, this soldier, to help us get in. It wasn't just because Cloud knew the layout, which apparently he didn't in this version of the game anyway. I don't know if he did in the previous version. I don't think they really played on that a whole lot. But the fact that he had the battle expertise, the combat expertise, so they left it all to him. I just thought that was really cool. And in the original game, you don't even get Barrett until I think you're going down the elevator. I think you get him around the same time you get him in the demo. I can't remember. I just thought that was a really nice touch because they all run ahead. In the original game, off screen, you can't even see them, but in this, multiple times, you just see them in cover until the enemies start attacking Cloud, and then they continue on. I thought that was a really nice touch. There are some things I didn't like about the demo, so we'll talk about those, and then we'll get into some neutral things before we wrap it up. I didn't like how when you're out of combat, and you go to swing your sword, you can only swing it once. And once you swing it, you're kind of like stuck in that animation. And it's a little bit of a long animation. So it just feels very sluggish. I feel like you should be able to swing as much as you want. And then when you're done, like roll right out of the animation. And maybe you can roll out of it. I'm not sure if I tried to roll. But I felt like I was stuck in that animation every time. And every time I swung, I felt like I wanted to swing an extra time. Because, like, if you get up close to the boxes that you're supposed to destroy to get some potions or extra MP or whatever, and you swing and you miss the boxes because maybe you weren't close enough, well, now you got to wait until the animation finishes, then get a little bit closer and then swing again. Whereas if you miss once, it would be nice to be able to just push the button and swing a second time and maybe step a little bit closer to what you're aiming at to destroy the boxes. I don't know. It's a little thing, but it bugged me. It occurred to me a lot throughout that demo that was a problem. So hopefully they fix that in the final version. Maybe that was just something in the opening area. I don't know. We'll see. But it was annoying. The music in this demo, while good, the music's great. It's the original soundtrack, or I should say, it's it's reorchestrated. Obviously, it's not the original, but it's the music from Final Fantasy VII. It lost its personality. There's a crunch. There's an industrialness to some of those early songs that was lost in this version. It feels too soft, if that makes sense. It just feels very light. It's because it's just all symphonic, and it lost the pipes banging as part of the music. It's just gone, and I didn't like that. I don't know if maybe that was just a layering thing, and maybe there's a layer to the music they didn't put in the demo, but we'll see. I'm not going to be overly disappointed if it is what it is in the final game, as it is in the demo, but it's not as good as it could have been or what I expected it to be. So that's a bit of a disappointment. This is more on me, but I've always said Mako instead of Mako. So yeah. I mean, that is on me, but it was a little odd when he was like, Mako energy. I'm like, Barrett, no, it's Mako. Oh no, I've been wrong all these years. I guess that's to be expected when you transition from a game that's all text and no voice to, oh, now people are saying these names and terminologies, and oh, that's not how I said it in my head. Is what it is. The sound effects for Final Fantasy VII's menu are gone. I mean, like, there's sound effects in the demo, but they're not the ones from the original game, which feels like it's a missed opportunity there. Because, if it was literally the original sounds, which shouldn't even impact a whole lot of anything. Who cares if it's like a MIDI old school version? Like, that would be cool to have that retro. I mean, it's not really retro. Oh gosh. I'm showing my age. 23 years ago, but they should have put that in there, and maybe they'll patch that in at some point if people complain about it enough. it's not terrible what's there now. It just, again, it's about the personality of Final Fantasy VII. I feel like it's been lost in the sound department, which kind of sucks. Visually, it all appears to be there. Story-wise, it appears to be there. Gameplay-wise, well, I'll get to that in a second. But the sounds, man, the music and the sound effects, they need to work on that a little bit more, in my opinion. Oh, well, I guess narratively, so there's, I've read about this online too. It occurred to me in the game, and then I see the back and forth online about the retcon with Shinra being the one to cause the reactor to explode. That is stupid as hell, in my opinion. In the original game, you caused the reactor to explode, and in this game, okay, so I guess we're in spoiler territory. It shouldn't be a spoiler. It's at the very beginning of the game. If you're listening to this, well, shame on you if you wanted to be spoiler-free. It shows that the bomb that you set after fighting the Scorpion boss, or during the boss, or whatever, right before it, doesn't go off. Like, it poofs out. And then you see President Shinra look at Heidegger, gosh, I hope that's how you say his name, and he pushes a button on his phone, and all the robots start shooting up the place and cause the whole thing to explode. There was no reason for that, and I think I understand why they did it, is because in this game, or in the original game, you're essentially a terrorist, right? Like, you go in there and blow up a reactor. That is a terrorist attack. And even though it had good intentions in the confines of the game, like, people got killed and hurt as part of that. So you, in many ways, were the bad guy. And I've talked about this before. I'm pretty sure in our first episode of this podcast, when I reminisced on Final Fantasy VII and I added it to the list, I talked about that. Like, all the characters, save for a few, like Aeris and Red 13, most of the characters in this game, in one way or another, are either evil or have some sort of, malicious presence in the game, even though you may not think it that way. It's true. And then it resonates so much when at the end of Final Fantasy VII, originally, big spoiler if you haven't beaten it, when you see Red 13 there 500 years later, and apparently all humanity is gone, and it's just the birds and Red 13 and trees and whatever, and the planet's still there, but no signs of humanity. I think that was a very strong message there. That humanity, if you don't shape up, you're destroying the planet. And I think that's a very timely message considering the state of our world today. But they chose to go a different path by having the quote-unquote bad guys of the game, the evil corporation, hurt themselves, presumably so they can pin it on Avalanche. But it's like, why? I mean, did they even know Avalanche was a bad group to begin with? Like, if they had that level of visibility over Avalanche, I mean, like, they're watching them go into the reactor the entire time, then why didn't they just kill them then and there? Like, I don't get what their strategy's gonna be now. Like, what is Shinra so afraid of? Like, why do they need Avalanche to be the bad guy? I don't understand that. And maybe there's gonna be a story change as part of this remake that's going to cause that to be an issue, but I didn't think that Avalanche was even on their radar until after the bombing. But in this, it's like, oh no, let's help them out because we have to present them as the bad guy. It's like, what? They could have just not let the reactor explode and go catch Avalanche. I don't get it. It just feels, unless there's a narrative purpose for it later, it feels like Square Enix went out of their way to change that narrative just so Avalanche aren't terrorists. But guess what? They still were terrorists just because the bomb didn't explode. It was an attempted terrorist attack. So, I don't know. We'll see. I will give them the benefit of the doubt for now, but I suspect I'm not going to enjoy what ends up as a result of that. And maybe that's it. Maybe they're just they made that change and then they're gonna ignore it from here on out. I don't know. I don't really like that, but it is what it is. Let's see. So some things that I was kind of neutral on. I'm still feeling out the combat, so we can talk about that real quick. When you're just slicing through enemies, it's fine. It's great. I just didn't get used to the shortcuts, the shortcut keys where you hold down, I think it's L1, and then you've got some commands that you can map. Similar to Kingdom Hearts, but you also have to like swap between characters, and I didn't really do much of that until I got to the Scorpion boss, and that boss is not the time where you want to try and figure that stuff out. So I stumbled my way through the boss, and if you're watching me play it, you'll see what I mean. I was popping potions left and right. I was constantly getting destroyed. I couldn't figure out how to switch and quickly get to fire or bolt or whatever it was that I needed to use. So I'm not saying that the combat's bad. I'm just saying I need to get better at it, or at least understand it a little bit more before I can draw a conclusion on it. It's still fun though. I enjoyed the combat for what it was. And the boss fight, while I stumbled through it, I did think it was pretty epic. And it translated... I thought they did a good job with it. It felt like a phase... Well, it was. It was a phased boss, like in an MMO or something like that. And they kind of needed that. Otherwise, it's just a tank with health that you're just constantly whittling down with a couple moves that you can figure out how to dodge. But when they phase it and they're constantly changing up the moveset, that makes it feel like a fun encounter and an organic encounter. I think I've used the word organic now 3 times so far while describing this demo. I'm excited that they did that with this boss, because then it set the expectation that they're going to do something like that with all of the bosses. So very curious to see how that goes. Looking forward to that. Lastly, I didn't try to grind in the demo, and I'm wondering if it's even possible. Maybe not in the demo area since it's kind of linear, but I'm wondering if you can go back and backtrack and some enemies have come back and you can fight them. Because if you, as a player, have trouble with the Scorpion boss right out the gate, yes, there's an easy mode, but if you want to play on normal and you just, for whatever reason, are struggling with it, I feel you should be able to go backwards and grind a bit to level up once or twice so that your health comes up, your defense comes up, your attack comes up. I didn't try to do it, so I'm curious to see if it's available. Maybe somebody can comment on the podcast and let me know if you can. But I feel you should be able to. If you couldn't do it in the demo, that doesn't mean you can't do it in the final game. You better be able to do it in the final game, or else that's gonna feel kind of weird. So yeah, overall, I think I'm gonna love this game. It's what I expected and not what I expected at the same time. I'm strangely looking forward to it, but not so hyped that I'm counting down the days. Like, I can wait for this game. And I think it's because now, having played the demo, as much fun as this game is going to be, I feel like I know what to expect now. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, and I'm not saying my expectations are low, but there's not that dream of what could be, and therefore I get overly hyped for something that's not really there. I know what I'm getting into now, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun, but I'm just not in a rush to get there. I'm hoping that by the end of this episode of the remake, which allegedly it ends at Midgar. We'll see where it goes. Maybe they'll let you go out into the open world a little bit. Maybe you can get to Calm, not sure. But if it literally ends right there on the highway, or right outside of Midgar, I hope it feels like an accomplishment. I hope I feel like I've played gosh, I really hope 30 to 40 plus hours of just main story by the end of this game, and I feel like, yeah, okay, that was worth just a full game. I'm worried that it won't be a feeling of accomplishment, because in the original game, that's like a 2 to 4 hour part of a 60-hour game. So I know they're not going to make this a 10-part series. At least I hope not, because then by the time they get to the end, they probably could have already started a second remake of this game. So we'll see. We'll see where they go from here. Looking forward to it. The demo sold me even more than I had been before. Looking forward to this game. I hope you are too. Now we're going to take a quick break. I want everyone to take a deep breath, relax, and meditate with some music from Shadow of the Colossus. That was The Farthest Land from Shadow of the Colossus. Now we're moving on to The List. The List is a continually growing record of every game I have ever played. Prior to this episode, there were 19 games on the list, but after today, there will be 24 games on the list. I'm going to talk about each game and then reveal its ranking. You can see the most up-to-date list on DireDireDocs.com. We're going to kick things off with Where in the World is Carmen, Sandiego? This was a game that I played on PC in my elementary school years. I say PC, it might have actually been Macintosh, don't know. It was on the computers at school. Man, it's weird. So I went and found some YouTube videos of this game, and I expected a lot more. Like, in hindsight, this game was like legendary among classmates. Like, man, that game was so much fun. And this was the version of the game, or a version of the game, prior to the show that came out that really made Carmen Sandiego popular. The game show. This was pre that, and there was just something magical about it back then, but upon review, it wasn't there for me looking at it. I mean, I tried to see it through a child's eyes, and I think the fact that you were being smart enough to answer the geographical questions and the historical questions that you were being asked, to track down the bad guys, and when you see the bad guy sneak off, you know that you got the question right. Like, that felt really good back then, and I think that was because you're in the mode where you're trying to get things right, you know, on your homework or on tests or on quizzes or whatever for school, and it just felt like you were being rewarded with something. It was definitely an educational game, but it felt like something more, at least to a kid back then. What caught me by surprise is that you never actually see Carmen in the game. At least I don't think you do. Like, you do catch, quote unquote, Carmen Sandiego, but it's like this shrouded figure with it, not her iconic red hat or red cape. Like, it was just some shadowy figure in a trench coat, and you can't even see their face. And it's like, oh, you caught Carmen Sandiego. It's like, okay. Maybe back then that was all we had because it was before the show, so I don't know. But it was a little disappointing to see in retrospect. So Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego is entering the list at 18th out of 24, just above Space Invaders. Next up is Ice Climbers. I didn't really play this game. Well, I didn't play this game until, I guess, the NES Classic. I can't remember if I played it before that. If it was in Animal Crossing, maybe I played it a little bit. But I really don't remember if I did. I mean, I was introduced to Ice Climbers through Smash Bros. Melee. I was like, oh, who are these guys? Okay, alright. I wasn't a fan of the game when I did play it. Granted, I played it way later in life relative to its release. It looks like something that would have been a lot of fun to play back in the time frame that it came out. I can appreciate the kind of level design it had, specifically in that you're constantly progressing upward, trying to dodge enemies, and I liked how there were some bonus events and things like that, but it just didn't seem like the game for me. So I'm going to put Ice Climbers in at 16th out of 24, just above Asteroids. Next up is Castlevania. Now, this was a game I did play back in the 80s, and I played it a decent amount. As a kid, this game felt, I don't want to say scary. I mean, I wasn't scared to play it, but you did feel on edge while playing it just because of the setting. And I think that was one of the first quote-unquote scary games that I played at all. So it had that going for it. It was pretty challenging for me. I mean, I never got to Dracula and probably never even got past the second or third boss. I feel like a lot of the challenge also had to do with the control scheme. I mean, the jumping in this game's a little rigid. Going up and down stairs, you have to press up at a certain point to get up the stairs. You can't just jump on them. So that was something I struggled with. It had that really weird, you timed your jump wrong, you missed the gap and you fell through the gap. Like, it didn't feel floaty like a Mario game. Like, it felt very stiff, and so I struggled with that. And I also had trouble just not getting hit in this game, especially from anything that flew in the air. I did really enjoy breaking the candles just to see what you would get, whether it would be hearts or or a new item that you could use against the enemies. I had a lot of fun with that. It felt like hitting a piñata. But I guess that's really all I can say for the game. I mean, it had great music too, at least for the couple levels I was able to get through as a kid. So yeah, I went off screen. Where am I? Castlevania comes in 10th place out of 24, just above. Wow, I've got my script on my phone of things that I want to say, and I keep jumping back and forth. Sorry. 10th, just above Mario Brothers. Not Super Mario Brothers, but Mario Brothers. Next up, I want to talk about Contra. This was the first game I can remember playing co-op at the same time, right? Like there's, using Mario, you can play Mario 2-player, but you're not playing it together. You were playing it one at a time. Contra, I'm pretty sure, was the first game I remember playing co-op, and it was a blast. I was playing it with my dad. We got to the snow level, or the winter ice level, which I think is maybe just halfway through the game, somewhere in there. And I remember we finally got there after however long it took us, and then he had to go to work, and I'm like, no, and I did what I could, but I died. I don't think we ever beat the game, but we did get far, and man, that game was a lot of fun. Unlike Castlevania, that game felt really responsive. I think it was still stiff in some places with its jumps, but the shooting, you could shoot in so many different directions, you could crouch. It just felt a lot more arcadey than Castlevania did, and many other games at the time. I liked how you could change the level design of this game, change perspectives. Like in one version, you're doing a side scroller left to right, and then you go into another area, and now you've got folks coming at you kind of like in 3D. It wasn't really 3D, but like that depth dimension. So that was cool. And man, there's like that one boss that basically looks like an alien out of Aliens that you got to destroy. That was a lot of fun, and it actually felt very similar to another boss that you fight in the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game. I can't remember if it was a dinosaur or if it was a giant mouser, but there's some robotic thing that you got to shoot eyes at in that game, and it looked a lot like that. And they were both by Konami, both of those games, so I guess that makes sense. Yeah, Contra was awesome back in the day, so I'm gonna put that at 7th place out of 24, just above Duck Hunt, which means the Oregon Trail is getting in somewhere in the top 6. So let's talk about that. Oregon Trail is this episode's featured game. Probably not going to talk about it too much relative to other featured games. This is one of the smaller ones. But, speaking about games that you played at school, like Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, the Oregon Trail was the game to play at school. So if you haven't played it, you go in, you pick the names of your companions, and then you go to a shop and you buy a whole bunch of stuff for your journey, and then you set off. And man, all anybody ever did was give people silly names and then go in and buy as much ammo as possible, because the best part about this game was the hunting. But before I get there, I'm pretty sure this was the first sim I ever played. I mean, you have to take into account a lot in this game. There's many things to consider. You have to consider the weather. You have to consider how fast you're eating your food, when you're going to rest and for how long, how fast are you traveling, because you can travel slow, you can travel medium, you can travel fast. When you get to a river, do you ford the river? Do you try and make your wagon into a raft and float across? Or do you just go pay and get on the ferry? When you bought all that ammo, did you make sure you bought a spare axle? Because at some point, you're probably going to break an axle and you're going to need to replace it. So there were a lot of different things you had to think about when you started this game, because getting from where you're at all the way to, I guess, California or Oregon, I don't know, I forget where you go in this game. I guess it would be Oregon. It's the Oregon Trail. There's a long way to go, and you have to be prepared. Otherwise, you're not going to make it, or if you do, you're going to have a really low score. So anyway, getting back to the hunting though, that was far and away the best part of this game as a kid. Yeah, the sim part of it was fun, but when you say, well, I'm going to go hunting, and you go out and you're in this field and you just see squirrels and rabbits and deer and buffalo running across the screen, and you just click to shoot and you see a bullet go out, and either you hit or you miss, but when you hit, man, it felt so good, and you just sit there and you try to shoot as many animals as you could, and you go back to your wagon with hundreds of pounds of meat that you can't even carry all of it. That's all I wanted to do in this game was basically play quote-unquote duck hunt with the Oregon Trail. Something that this game does that a lot of games don't do, it keeps a running log of your adventure. So it almost feels like a journal, or I guess a narrative in some ways, because, you know, you're playing and then all of a sudden, oh, Timmy has typhoid fever, we need to rest, and you know, oh, you brought back 300 pounds of meat, or oh, there's no grass for the oxen, or oh, we lost whatever crossing the river. It keeps track of all that, and it presents it basic words, right? It's not like these super descriptive sentences or anything, so it's not like a narrative, but it felt like you were making your own story as you went along. I mean, it was a sim. It felt great. There was something magical about that I really enjoyed, and actually I had a group of friends in high school / college. We're all still friends today, but a group that I hung out with online every day. And with this game, at one point, I went in and I put in their names as the companions. There were many more than the 4 or 5 that it actually let you do, so I played around with that. But I put in their names, and then like I ran through the Oregon Trail, and then I copied all the text out into a notepad file, and then I tweaked it, and I like added stupid little things, just to make it funny for adolescent kids at the time. And oh my gosh, that was a blast. I think I have it somewhere on my Facebook somewhere or something. It's probably really stupid and silly and immature looking at it now, but that was something I thought was so cool that you could do, is you could go basically run a simulation and then tweak it, and there you go. Now you've got your own little story. So that was a lot of fun. You know, and I mentioned, oh, what happens if little Timmy gets sick? You could be sadistic with this game, right? Like, you could play it the right way, which is get everybody and everything to the end of the line and get a high score. Or you could be real sadistic and like, all right, nobody eats anything. We're going at full speed. We're fording the river, just to like, for lack of a better term, destroy everything. Like, you could play it to where, you've got yellow fever. Too bad. We're gonna keep on going. And you know, that was a way to play the game, I suppose. I mean, it ended pretty quick when you did it that way. Yeah, I don't really know what else I want to discuss here. It was a very menu-driven game. It did have visuals, which a lot of the PC games back then, like Carmen Sandiego did. They just have this one little window where you get some sort of visual illustration of what's going on, but the rest of it's text and buttons. It had some music in the game, a lot of American folk songs, I guess. Nothing really to write home about there, but there was something about the Oregon Trail that was fantastic. Again, I think a lot of these games that I played that were the first game in the genre that I played, in hindsight, I'm clinging to them probably a little bit harder than maybe I would if I played them after the fact. But the Oregon Trail is one of those games that's going down in the history of gaming. Like, it's up there. So I'm going to put the Oregon Trail on the list in 5th place out of 24, coming in just above Super Mario Bros. 2 and just below Super Mario Bros. So congrats, the Oregon Trail. That does it for this episode of the Dire Podcast. I want to thank you for listening. Please check out diredire.docs.com for podcast updates and updates on other content. I am thinking about doing another podcasty type show, but I haven't gotten it fully produced or figured out yet. But be on the lookout for that in the coming weeks and or months. Who knows how long it's going to take me to get it situated, but I do have that idea, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So be on the lookout for that. This is Sean Pfeil, and this has been the Dire Podcast. Thank you very much.